It detonated like a flashbang. Overnight, Beijing's entertainment world looked like it had been cracked open and shaken hard. Every screen, every feed, every gossip account screamed the same headline in different fonts. Tycoon Adrian Tate personally picks up his white moonlight at the airport past midnight. Old love suspected to return. The looping clip was cruel in how perfect it was. A storm hammered the airport glass. Rain slashed sideways under a row of harsh white lights. And there, framed like a scene someone had rehearsed 100 times, a girl in a white dress laughed as she sprinted forward and threw herself into a man's arms. Adrian wore a black suit like a uniform. He tilted the umbrella toward her without thinking, letting half his own shoulder take the rein. One hand guarded the top of her head, the other settled at the small of her back, careful and gentle, like she was something fragile he couldn't afford to drop. That 1 second got enlarged, sharpened, clipped into GIFs, slowed down, captioned, memed, and shoved into the mouths of millions. Under the comments, the internet turned feral. Oh my God. This is so second chance romance, I can taste it. Look at how he holds her. That is not just friends. Push the ship. Push it harder. Ava Lynn sat alone in the quiet corner of a French-style restaurant, tucked beside a floor-to-ceiling window. Warm amber light painted her face in gold, but it couldn't warm the pale shade that had settled into her skin from waiting too long. She kept pinching the photo on her phone, zooming in and out, as if clarity was something you could force with your fingers. The rain outside streaked down the glass in long, blurred lines, turning the image into a watercolor smear. She couldn't see his expression. Not really, but she didn't need to. The familiar chin, the sharp bridge of the nose, the wide shoulders, the slight bend of his posture when he leaned down to shelter someone. It was him. Adrian Tate, her husband, on paper, for 5 years. Ma'am, the waiter's voice came softly, politely, like he was afraid of breaking something already cracked. We're about to close. Would you like to keep waiting? A thunderclap rolled over the city. Lightning combed the sky. The rain hit the window harder, a frantic drumming that sounded like impatience. Ava turned her face toward the glass and caught her own reflection, makeup flawless, hair perfect, lips carefully chosen. For a second, she didn't recognize the woman staring back. She looked like a stranger dressed for someone else's life. Today was her birthday, and yet the entire night had been built around him. 2 weeks ago, she had reserved this table in the restaurant he liked most. She had read the menu until the words blurred, then called the chef to confirm the details Adrian never bothered to say out loud. Medium rare steak. No spice. Not too sweet. The red wine he always approved of with a careless, fine. This morning she woke up at 5, washed her hair, treated her skin, applied her makeup with slow precision, changed outfits twice, then once more. Every extra minute was a silent prayer. Let me be perfect when he finally looks at me. On the chair beside her sat a delicate thermal box. Inside was an old-fashioned chocolate mousse cake, the kind Adrian's father used to love. She'd ordered it from a bakery so old it smelled like history, then crossed half the city in the rain to pick it up herself. Her birthday, her night, her table, and still, everything revolved around Adrian. Even the lipstick shade she wore was something he had once glanced at and said looked okay. She had waited from dusk until the city turned electric with lights. Couples came and went, their laughter rising and fading like tides. Their wine glasses emptied. Her untouched dishes cooled until sauces thickened, foam collapsed, candle wax pooled and hardened. The flame in her chest followed the same path, bright at first, trembling, then quietly, humiliatingly, gone. The man she was waiting for never arrived. Ava looked down again at the man in the gossip photo, leaning an umbrella over another woman, protecting her from the rain as if the world could not be allowed to touch her. Her lips curved into a smile that hurt her own ribs. In 5 years of marriage, she couldn't count how many times she'd waited, outside meeting rooms, beside unanswered calls, at the edge of parties where he didn't introduce her, in beds that stayed cold until dawn. Each time she lied to herself the same way. Next time will be different. Next time, he'll choose me. But the result never changed. Hope filled her up. Disappointment drowned her. All it took was that returning white moonlight, Chloe Shen, and Adrian would drop everything, including the wife who had stood beside him for 5 years, like a shadow that never complained. Ava suddenly felt as if she'd fallen into a black hole. Even breathing felt heavy. She was so tired she could taste it. She didn't want to wait anymore. Not tonight. Not in this marriage that had only ever been maintained by one person holding the thread until her fingers bled. Ava lifted her head and gave the waiter a small, steady smile. No, I'm not waiting. Her gaze flicked to the untouched table. These dishes haven't been touched. Can I exchange them for an umbrella? The waiter blinked, startled, then nodded fast. Of course you can. Thank you, she said, soft enough that it sounded like she was thanking someone for finally opening a door. Minutes later, she stepped out into the downpour holding a simple black umbrella. The wind shoved at it until the ribs bowed. She flagged a taxi, slid into the back seat, and let the door shut out the roar of rain, leaving only damp cold seeping from the leather. As the city blurred past, her mind slid backward through years she didn't talk about. A mountain village. Poverty that made meat a holiday rumour. A father lost to an accident when she was 8. A mother who followed a few years later, leaving Ava alone inside a leaking house with winter creeping in like a thief. If the Tate Group Scholarship Fund hadn't reached into that mountain and dragged her toward the light, she would have been pulled out of school, thrown into factory work, or married off young like the other girls who never left. She had clung to the only hand offered to her, studied until her eyes burned, earned the grades, walked off the mountain, entered a key high school, then a university she once only dared to admire on a brochure taped to her wall. To her, the Tate family wasn't just a sponsor. They were salvation. And then, at a charity gala 2 years into her career, she saw Adrian in the front row, centre seat, black suit cut like a blade, gaze cool enough to make the air around him feel untouched. She approached with a shaking voice and an honest gratitude. He listened until she said the words, "Repay your kindness." And then he looked up like she had finally said something interesting. "Repay me?" he had murmured, almost amused. "I don't lack fame, power, or money." His eyes travelled calmly over her, then stopped at her whitening knuckles around the glass. "What I lack is a woman I can bring to events." Then, leaning closer, voice low enough to pin her in place, he asked, "Do you want to repay me with yourself? No proposal, no ring, no wedding, no flowers, just a quiet marriage registration like signing a contract." And maybe because she had been obtained too easily, he treated her like an item stored away. She tried to open his heart for years and found only steel. Later, she understood it wasn't because she wasn't enough. It was because Adrian's heart had always kept one name like an altar. Chloe Shen, his first love. The moonlight he never stopped looking for. Her phone vibrated, yanking Ava back into the present. A message from Adrian, cold and neat, as if typed while walking. Something came up. "Next year, I'll make it up to you." Next year. Ava stared at those words until they stopped looking like language and became a joke. She typed a reply, then deleted it. Adrian Tate. There is no next year for us. The taxi rolled to a stop at the gates of the Tate villa. Through the rain-smeared window, Ava saw him on the stone steps, black coat, umbrella in hand, arms around a woman in white. He lowered his head to say something. The curve of his mouth was gentle. Ava didn't go inside. She opened a rental app, chose a small apartment near the river, signed for 6 months without bargaining, and walked into an empty room lit by a harsh white ceiling lamp that cast her thin shadow onto bare tile. Then her phone rang. Chloe Shen. Ava answered on the third attempt, her voice calm. Hello. Chloe's voice was soft, sweet, dipped in fake apology. Mrs. Tate, I'm so sorry. I heard you and Adrian had a misunderstanding because of me. I'm worried about you. Truly. Ava listened, barefoot on cold tile, and felt the absurdity land like a stone. If Adrian had really worried, the Tate family could find her with one call. He would have called. He would have sent someone. He would have turned the city over. But the first person to reach her wasn't him. It was the white moonlight he had just sheltered from the rain. When Chloe's tone finally sharpened into something honest, the sweetness peeled away. Running away won't work, Chloe said with a quiet laugh. If you step aside willingly, I can ask Adrian to compensate you. Generously. Ava's mouth lifted. Okay. Chloe froze. What did you say? I said okay, Ava repeated, each word clean and level. Tomorrow morning. A cafe. I'll send the address. We'll talk about compensation. The next morning, Chloe arrived early and waited until her cappuccino went half cold and the foam collapsed into a sad swirl. At 9:27, the sound of heels finally approached. Ava walked in wearing a simple white shirt under a light brown trench coat, hair pinned neatly, expression serene, as if she'd come for a quiet break rather than a war. You're late, Chloe snapped. Ava pulled out the chair and sat opposite her with unhurried grace. Her smile was thin. Yes, I'm playing with you. Chloe's anger flashed. She stood, hand raised to slap. Ava caught her wrist easily, not brutal, just absolute. She gave a small push. Chloe stumbled back into the sofa, hair falling out of place, humiliation blooming bright on her face. Ava's eyes stayed calm as still water. Miss Shen, if you're this impatient, you won't sit very steadily in the position of Mrs. Tate. Chloe forced herself upright, jaw tight. You didn't bring me here just to drink coffee. Of course not. Ava opened her bag, took out a slim stack of documents, and placed them carefully on the table. Divorce agreement. Chloe's pupils tightened. You! Isn't this what you wanted? Ava said, voice quiet, almost bored. I'll divorce Adrian. She paused, then looked Chloe directly in the eye. On one condition. You help me with 2 things. After the cooling-off period, after the papers are final, I will disappear completely from your world. Chloe's lips trembled with the first taste of victory she'd ever had that felt this close. And Ava, finally, felt something else rise in her chest. Not hope, not pain. A plan. What 2 things? Chloe asked, her smile still hanging there, polished and rehearsed. Ava didn't match it. She didn't even try. She simply set her fingertips on the edge of the paper stack, as if anchoring herself to a decision that could no longer be shaken. First, Ava said, there are still a few of my things in the villa. Have them packed and sent to me. I'll text you the address later. Chloe's lashes flickered. A small detail, but not insignificant, as if the wife was already speaking from the other side of the door. And second, Ava tapped the folder lightly. Tap. Tap. I've signed the divorce agreement. Her voice was calm enough to be cruel. I need you to get Adrian to sign it, Ava continued. Without suspecting anything. I don't want him to know. This came from me. I don't want him to think I asked for it. Not even for a second. Chloe's brows knit together. Suspicion rising like steam. Why don't you hand it to him yourself? Ava tilted her head, gaze drifting past Chloe's shoulder as if the cafe wall had turned into a screen. For one brief moment, an old memory replayed with the sharpness of pain. The steps outside the marriage registry office. Adrian had stood one step higher, the forms clipped between two long fingers, looking down at her as if he was studying something he couldn't decide whether to keep. Are you sure? He'd asked, again and again. Is this just a moment of impulse? Back then, she'd been hit by happiness so sudden it made her dizzy. A man like him, untouchable, elevated, worshipped standing beneath the plain government sign, asking if she truly wanted to marry him. In her eyes, everything had been coated in soft pink light. She'd wanted that certificate, the way a starving person wants bread. Quickly, desperately, so quickly, she hadn't listened to what his caution really meant. Later, when she learned the shape of his past with Chloe Shen, there were nights she had been desperate enough to think of divorce. And then she'd heard the whisper everyone in their circle knew. The Tate family did not divorce. In their rules, a marriage ended in only two ways. Someone died, or you grew old together. There was no middle door, no exit labelled divorce. That knowledge had sat on her chest like a slab of ice. Each time the thought flickered, she crushed it with her own hands and told herself, if I just endure a little longer, he'll see me. If I just try harder, maybe. But now every maybe had been smothered. Ava's eyes refocused on Chloe, clear and steady. I wasn't decisive before because I still had hope. Her voice didn't tremble. Now I don't. I will divorce him. She let the words settle. Then she added, almost gently, even if I have to borrow his white moonlight to do it. Chloe left the cafe at some point without Ava noticing the exact moment. When Ava surfaced from her own stillness, the chair across from her was empty, and the divorce agreement was gone. Ava finished the last swallow of her coffee, stood, and stepped into the flow of pedestrians outside. From that second on, she had cut the rope that had tied her to the Tate family for 5 years, and the most terrifying part was how light she felt. This was Ava's 3rd day away from the villa. In the morning, Adrian sat at the dining table, frowned at the pale sandwich in front of him, white bread, bland filling, neat as a hospital tray, and took a sip of coffee. His face twisted instantly. He set the cup down hard enough that the dark liquid sloshed over the rim. Did we change chefs? He snapped. Why does this taste like dirt? The housekeeper beside him bowed quickly, awkward. No, sir. We didn't change anyone. It's just your meals have always been prepared by Mrs. Tate. Personally, we don't have her exact recipes. Once the seal was broken, the words poured out. Not only breakfast, everything. Adrian's schedule, his sleeping habits, which shirts needed to hang separately, which suits needed steaming, how long the salad dressing could sit before it turned sharp, which brand of sparkling water he'd drink without frowning. Even when Ava travelled for work, she arranged it all before leaving and called home daily with small reminders. No coffee after 10, don't keep cold food too long, take the vitamins in the left drawer. Adrian listened without interruption. No reaction, no comment. But when the plate was cleared and the sandwich had gone completely cold, Something unfamiliar rose in him, like walking a road you've taken for years, and suddenly realizing you never once noticed who turned on the streetlights at night. On the 5th day, Adrian finally admitted a truth his pride had tried to reject. She didn't leave to sulk. She left. He stood on the wide balcony as dusk sank, orange bleeding into grey, the wind sharp enough to sting. For the first time in a long time, he called Ava himself. 1 ring, 2. No answer. He called again. Declined. Again. Declined. His jaw tightened. His next instinct was to call her family, to ask if she had gone to an older relative the way women sometimes did when they were upset. And then he remembered. Ava had no one. She was an orphan. The only person who had ever truly been family. To her, her grandmother had died years ago. Adrian scrolled through his contact list, thumb moving up and down like he could conjure a name out of pressure alone. He couldn't find a best friend, a colleague, anyone tied closely enough to Ava that he could demand answers. And in that moment, something unpleasant slid under his skin. He knew almost nothing about the world of the woman who had lived beside him for 5 years. He pushed open Ava's bedroom door, hoping to find a clue. He froze. In his memory, the room had been simple. A bed, a wardrobe, a vanity. Small things, neatly arranged. Quiet and modest, like the woman who lived there. But now the closet doors were flung open, bursting with glittering jewellery, designer handbags, bright dresses, loud colours, sharp shine, everything screaming for attention. The room didn't look like Ava. It looked like an invasion. He turned, ready to demand who had touched her things, and saw Chloe Shen coming down the stairs with a bouquet of vivid red roses in her arms, smiling like she belonged. "Adrian," she chirped, breathless. The roses on the rooftop bloomed so beautifully. "You have to see." Her voice died when she met his face. What's wrong?" Adrian stared at her, every word edged. "Where are the things that used to be in this room?" For a fraction of a second, Chloe went rigid. Then the smile returned, practiced and smooth. "Oh, those were outdated, so I asked the staff to dispose of them." She stepped closer, trying to soften the moment with a little pout, a little sweetness. "Are you angry? I understand. This is your home with Mrs. Tate. Of course, only you two have the right to decide." The sentence hung unfinished. The air in the villa dropped several degrees. Chloe swallowed, eyes reddening with perfectly timed tears. "I'm just an outsider. Maybe I should go." Her sniffles echoed in the room that used to be Ava's. And for reasons Adrian couldn't name, irritation scratched at him. Ava never cried. Even the year he spent months abroad helping Chloe finalize her divorce from an abusive husband, Ava had called him a few times, always steady, always ending the same way. "Take care of yourself. Don't drink too late. No accusations, no tantrums, no pleading." Now, watching Chloe's tears spill like a performance, he should have felt tender. Instead, he felt tired. Chloe's eyes lifted secretly, following his gaze. He was staring at the ruined room at the absence, not the replacement. Jealousy curdled inside her. She'd come back. She'd stayed. She'd decided she wasn't leaving again. So why was his mind still reaching for Ava? Chloe's sobs turned louder, more dramatic. "It's all my fault. I shouldn't have returned. I shouldn't have stayed in her room. I'm leaving." She threw the bouquet down and bolted. "Chloe!" Adrian snapped out of it and caught up, grabbing her arm. "Let me go," she cried, twisting. "If it weren't for me, if I didn't come back, if I didn't distract you, she wouldn't have run away like this." The harder she struggled, the tighter he held, as if holding her could erase the chaos. "It has nothing to do with you. Adrian said, voice dropping. She's the one being unreasonable. He emphasized each word, as if logic could replace guilt. Chloe gave a small, bitter laugh through tears. Unreasonable? Or spoiled? Her lashes clung wetly. You made her this way, Adrian. You trained her to believe she could have you all to herself. Adrian's hand tightened. And then, finally, something buried slipped out. Why I married her, he said low and sharp. Do you really think you don't know? Chloe froze, staring up at him. Was it really because of me? Adrian didn't answer, but his silence was louder than any confession. Chloe's tears slowed, her breathing steadied. And then, slowly, she smiled. That night, Adrian arranged a candlelit dinner for Chloe, as if romance could be manufactured like a public apology. The table was filled with dishes Chloe loved. Red wine poured and poured, ruby slipping down crystal glass, luxurious and blurry. Adrian wasn't a heavy drinker, but tonight he emptied one glass, then another, as if the warmth in his throat could drown the itch in his mind. When Chloe judged the moment ripe, she reached into her bag and pulled out a document folder. Adrian, she said softly, as if embarrassed. The villa you bought for me. The lawyers said there's an additional appendix that needs your signature. She slid it toward him with the casual ease of someone handing over a receipt. Adrian took it out of habit. He was always careful, always the man who read every page. Trusted no one completely, not even people he loved. His fingers turned the first page. Chloe's hand rested lightly on his wrist. She smiled, then suddenly pressed her fingers to her temple, brow furrowing. His movement stopped instantly. That single phrase, "don't feel well," cut through his vigilance like scissors. He reached for her forehead. Where? I'll take you to the hospital. He began to set the papers down, already lifting to pull her up. Panic flashed in Chloe's eyes. She grabbed his hand quickly, shaking her head hard. No, it's nothing. I'm just tired. Please just sign. Then we'll go home. Between paperwork and the health of the woman he had carried like a regret for years, he chose the second without hesitation. Adrian didn't read another line. He signed where she pointed, at the bottom of the final page. The familiar, forceful signature appeared beneath 3 words Chloe made sure he never looked at long enough to process. Divorce agreement. When the signed copy reached Ava, she stood at the window of her small apartment for a long time, watching misty rain braid itself over the river like thin, silver threads. For the first time in days, her smile was real quiet, relieved, almost weightless. 1 month, just 1 month of waiting, and she and Adrian Tate would become 2 straight lines that never intersected again. No more excuses. No more hope. No more waiting. A week later, a call came from the Tate ancestral estate, the annual family gathering, and as the eldest daughter-in-law, Ava's attendance was not optional. After the accident at the lake and the sudden discovery that Ava was pregnant, the Tate ancestral estate treated her like a rare artifact that could not be chipped. Boxes arrived as if the house itself were bleeding luxury. Ancient ginseng sealed in lacquered cases, bird's nest in porcelain jars, lingji wrapped like treasure, broths simmered for hours, their scent drifting through corridors like a constant reminder that her body now belonged to more than herself. A famous physician was brought in twice a week to take her pulse, prescribe herbs, adjust her diet with the seriousness of designing a national policy. And Adrian, outside of visiting Chloe Shen, outside of handling business, spent most of what remained of his time doing one thing, staying in Ava's room. He stayed so close it became oppressive. In the morning he was there when the doctor examined her, listening with a face that barely moved. At noon he brought paperwork in and worked beside her bed. the pages making soft, tidy sounds when he turned them. At night, he sat on the sofa, reading the paper, pausing whenever she shifted under the blanket, as if her smallest movement could be a siren. But the strangest part was that his devotion didn't feel like love. It felt like something else, wearing love's clothes. A duty, a correction, a late repayment. Since the wedding, they had never truly lived together in the way real couples did. Their days had overlapped like two strangers, sharing a hotel suite. And after Adrian began flying back and forth to help Chloe finalize her divorce, their marriage had become even more hollow, two people passing in the same house without touching the same life. Now he sat beside Ava, close enough that she could hear his breathing, close enough that she could smell the faint cologne at his collar. Once, she would have treasured that. Once, she would have been so hungry for his presence that a single quiet hour beside him would have made her entire week feel worthwhile. But the thing she had begged for arrived precisely when she no longer wanted it. Instead of warmth, she felt a sour discomfort she couldn't name. So she closed her eyes and pretended to sleep. Because it was easier than facing affection that came with an expiry date. When Chloe heard the maids whispering about Ava's pregnancy, she nearly crushed the glass in her hand. Two sharp flames flared behind her eyes. Her nails dug into her palm until the pain steadied her breathing. They had been clear with each other. Ava had promised divorce. A clean cut, a graceful surrender of the title Mrs. Tate, so Chloe could step into it without a fight. And now there was a baby. A baby turned everything into a chain. Was Ava changing her mind? Was she trying to lock Adrian down at the last second? That suspicion grew teeth. And it made Chloe reckless. One afternoon, while Adrian was forced out by an urgent meeting, Chloe finally found her chance to step into Ava's room. Ava was propped against the headboard with a paperback in hand. When the door opened, she lifted her gaze for half a second, then lowered it again as if Chloe were nothing more than a draught of air. That calmness, so unbothered it bordered on contempt, made Chloe's irritation spike. "Ava Lynn," Chloe snapped. Ava closed the book, slid a finger between the pages to hold her place, and looked up. Her eyes were so even, so composed, it made Chloe feel as if she were the one misbehaving. "Yes?" Ava's voice was polite enough to sting. "Miss Shen, what can I do for you?" Chloe's jaw tightened. "You're pregnant, and you still want to divorce him. Do you think anyone will believe you? That title is cement now. You say divorce, who's going to take it seriously?" Ava let out a small laugh, thin as thread. "When did I say I wasn't giving the title to you?" For a moment, Chloe just stared. In her mind, Ava's talk of divorce had always been tantrum language, something a woman said when she wanted attention. A wife who had endured for 5 years, watching her husband fly back and forth for another woman, wouldn't suddenly become brave enough to leave. And now she was pregnant. Leaving would be irrational. Yet Ava's face held no confusion, no bargaining, no silent begging, only decision. Chloe's voice sharpened. "Then what are you going to do with the child?" The question left her mouth, and her expression changed as if she had stepped too close to a cliff and felt air drop away. "No," Chloe whispered, horrified by her own thought. "You don't mean—" Ava's gaze didn't flinch. "Adrian has people watching me. I can't get out." Her eyes lifted slightly. "You wanted me to disappear, didn't you? Then, create an opening. Get him out of the estate." Chloe searched Ava's face for hesitation, for some soft motherly tremor, some hidden plea for permission to stay. She found only still water. Finally, Chloe nodded once. "Fine." At the door, she paused. unable to stop herself. You endured for years. Why are you suddenly this determined now? Ava didn't answer at first. Only when Chloe's shadow nearly vanished down the corridor did Ava speak, quietly, without drama. Because I'm not happy. Ava had known from the beginning that Adrian loved Chloe. She had known he chased her overseas, sat beside her, thought of her even when he came home. And still, Ava had endured. 1 year was endurance. 5 years was endurance. A lifetime, if she forced herself, could have been endurance too. She had tried to soothe her own heart with lies that sounded like wisdom. Just be patient. You'll get used to it. It will get better. But every sleepless night, every time she lay in a wide bed, feeling like the only person in it, the same 3 words pressed against her ribs like a bruise that never healed. Not happy, not happy, not happy. Adrian Tate, she thought. Living beside you all these years, I have been so unhappy. A human life was only about 30,000 days, give or take. From now on, she wanted whatever remained to belong to Ava Lynn, not to the shadow called Mrs. Tate. She didn't want to spend another ounce of strength trying to earn love from a man who had never offered it. That night, Adrian returned exhausted, reaching for Ava's door. When his phone rang, he answered, and Chloe's trembling sobs poured through the line. Adrian, my ex-husband is here again. He's harassing me. Her voice broke, then the signal cut off abruptly. Adrian's face darkened. He didn't hesitate. He turned away from Ava's door without even pushing it open, shouted for security, and rushed out into the night. The moment the main gate swallowed his car, Ava moved. She slipped into a coat, pulled a cap low, and walked out through the service exit like a ghost. No one noticed. No one stopped her. Adrian reached Chloe's apartment to find the hallway silent. He unlocked the door and saw her curled in the corner, shoulders shaking, face pale, eyes wide like a child's in a nightmare. You came, she sobbed. I was so scared. Adrian patted her back, voice softening automatically. It's fine. He's gone. I'm here. No one will touch you. She clung to him as if she might shatter if he loosened his grip. He soothed her until her breathing steadied, then glanced at the clock. Midnight. A flicker of unease tugged at him. Ava was pregnant, alone at the estate. I'll go back and check on her, he said, guiding Chloe toward the bed, pulling the blanket up. Chloe's hand shot out and grabbed his sleeve. Tears sprang back instantly, perfectly timed. He could come back any time, Adrian. Please, just one night. Stay with me. He hesitated. A pregnant wife on one side of the scale, a woman he had carried as guilt for years on the other. Chloe's shaking Adrian hooked into him like an invisible line. In the end, he told a guard to stay outside her door, and he stayed. Under a surgical lamp, white light flooded Ava's vision until the world looked sterile and unreal. She lay still on the operating table, both hands resting on her abdomen as if holding a door closed. Her phone buzzed beside her. At her signal, the nurse held it up so she could hear. Adrian's voice came through, steady as ever, calm as if discussing a schedule change. Chloe's ex-husband harassed her again. For safety, I have to stay with her a few days. I'll come back after. Ava stared up at the ceiling light, and her voice remained gentle. No accusation, no tremor. It's okay, stay with Miss Shen. Adrian paused, faintly surprised, as if her obedience was a relief. He began to say something else, but the line went dead. Ava had ended the call. Her fingers trembled slightly when she handed the phone back to the doctor, but her eyes were quiet, clear, terribly calm. One last time, she pressed her palm to her stomach. A child that had never been awaited by its father, never blessed, never chosen. If it was born, it would become a chain binding her to a man who didn't love her, binding the child to a home where it would always be second place. "I'm sorry," she whispered inwardly. "I can't give you warmth. I can't give you a real family. I can only hope you find a place that loves you more than this world ever would." She lowered her hand, closed her eyes, and spoke softly, like she was ordering tea. "Start the procedure, doctor." The applause crashed like thunder. Confetti cannons erupted on both sides of the aisle, paper fireworks bursting into the air and drifting down in glittering snowfall. The priest smiled, hands lifted in solemn blessing, and declared with practiced warmth, "From this moment on, you are husband and wife before God and before all witnesses." Adrian Tate's eyes curved despite himself, the faintest shadow of a smile pulling at his mouth. For the first time in a long time, something that looked like anticipation flickered across his face. The priest stepped back. Adrian reached out, fingers poised to lift the veil, but the bride clutched the lace edge with both hands and wouldn't let go. He assumed it was shyness. He leaned closer, voice low, gentle, in a way he rarely used, like a husband learning the script of tenderness by heart. "Ava," he murmured, "don't be scared." The bride froze. For several seconds, long enough to feel like slow motion, those fingers tightened, trembled, then loosened. The veil surrendered to his hand. Adrian lifted it, and the moment the white lace rose, the face beneath it surfaced like a knife breaking skin. His pupils constricted. Chloe? It wasn't Ava Lynn. It was Chloe Shen in a wedding gown, standing at his side as if she had always belonged there. Shock flared, sharp and bright, then vanished behind his eyes with brutal speed. Adrian dropped the veil back down as though it were burning his fingers, covering Chloe's face again. He turned toward the guests, calm and controlled, the perfect air with the perfect smile. "My apologies," he said evenly. Laughter rippled through the room. People nodded, as if it were charming, as if nothing had happened. The orchestra swelled. The banquet began, smooth as silk, and for a few minutes, the world pretended not to have witnessed a crack in reality. Traditionally, after changing from ceremony attire, the bride and groom would descend to toast each table. Mr. and Mrs. Tate waited, and waited. Adrian's mother told herself they were caught up in the heat of newlyweds, that maybe her son was finally being affectionate. But as the reception neared its end and still no bride or groom appeared, irritation sharpened her smile. She tilted her head toward a maid. "Go upstairs. Tell them to change and come down." "Yes, ma'am." The maid hurried to the bridal suite and knocked softly. "Sir, ma'am, the family requests you come down after changing." Silence. Then a man's voice, steady and curt. "Understood. Go ahead." The maid left, relieved. The moment her footsteps faded, Adrian turned toward the woman in the gown. "Why is it you?" His voice was flat, no warmth, no awe, only control. "What did you do?" Chloe's eyes were red, but the tears there were no longer innocent. They were cloudy with stubbornness, thick with entitlement. "Why can't it be me?" She choked. "Adrian, were you really going to hold a wedding for her? If things hadn't happened back then, the woman beside you today should have been me." She pointed to herself as if presenting evidence. "I'm only taking back what was always mine." Her sobs rang in the quiet suite, and for the first time maybe in his whole life, Adrian realized he didn't have the patience to soothe her the way he always had. He rubbed his temple, breath tight. "Chloe, this isn't the time." "It is the time," she snapped, voice rising. "If you love me, prove it." Adrian's gaze sharpened. "You don't understand what you've stepped into." This wedding is public. The media is here. My name and Ava's are on every headline. The whole city knows she's the bride. His eyes locked onto hers. If it gets out that we switched her. Chloe interrupted, tears streaking down. Then, announce it. Tell them you changed the bride. Her voice trembled with a threat disguised as heartbreak. If you don't, I walk out right now. She grabbed her skirt and spun toward the door. Adrian's arm shot out, blocking her path. For a heartbeat, relief softened Chloe's expression. He wasn't letting her go. He cared. Then Adrian spoke, and his words landed like winter water to the face. You can't go out there. Chloe's smile snapped. What? If anyone sees you, he said, returning to cold logic, the consequences will be catastrophic. Stay here. When the guests leave, we'll talk. He didn't look at her again. He shut the door. The lock clicked so quiet it was almost nothing, yet Chloe heard it in her bones like the bolt of a prison. Alone in the bridal suite, she clenched her fists until her nails bit skin. She had always believed becoming Mrs. Tate would be as easy as breathing. Adrian had loved her. He had flown across oceans for her. He had abandoned his wife for her again and again. Ava had even made space. All Chloe needed was one public moment, one lifted veil, one sentence. But instead, Adrian hid her, dragged her upstairs like contraband, locked her away like shame. Chloe stared into the mirror. The face she had once been proud of was still beautiful, but time had sharpened it differently. A failed marriage, a messy exit, years of being looked at like a woman men could touch but wouldn't marry. Adrian was her last door into that world, and she refused to stand quietly outside it. Downstairs, Adrian descended alone. His mother's eyes narrowed instantly. Why are you alone? Where is Ava? Adrian steadied his expression. She fell into the lake recently. She's pregnant. She's exhausted. I told her to rest. His mother's irritation eased, replaced by concern. Fine. Go toast the guests. Adrian picked up a glass and turned toward the tables. Then, behind him, a voice stretched out, soft and wounded. Adrian. The entire hall pivoted as one organism. Even Mr. and Mrs. Tate looked toward the staircase. Adrian turned. And there she was, Chloe Shen, in a white wedding gown. Veil gone, hair spilling over her shoulders, eyes wet and fixed on him like a vow. His mother's face dropped to stone. Before security could move, Chloe gathered her skirt and ran down the stairs straight into Adrian's arms. The one marrying you today is me, she cried, gripping his sleeve hard. Why won't you let me come down? Don't you love me? Whispers rose like a tide. Guests didn't need explanations, they understood enough. The kind of enough that would be repeated for years. Adrian's composure finally cracked. He seized Chloe's wrist, voice low and lethal near her ear. Chloe, stop! But Chloe lifted her voice higher, deliberately letting everyone hear. You don't love Ava. If you did, why did you leave her every time for me? You helped me divorce him. You picked me up from the airport. You let me live in your home. She laughed through tears. If that isn't love, then what is? Adrian's mother forced a social smile and signaled the butler. The butler stepped forward, bowed, and announced smoothly, My deepest apologies. This young lady is unwell and not in her right mind. Please forgive the disturbance. Polite laughter. Polite exits. Guests filed out, wearing courtesy on their faces and scandal in their eyes. And what they would say later behind closed doors, over drinks, in private chats, was beyond the Tate family's control. When the last guest left the gate, Adrian's mother's smile shattered. She turned and slapped Chloe so hard the sound snapped through the empty hall. "You shameless girl." Chloe's cheek bloomed red, fingerprints carved into her skin. And yet Adrian stepped in front of Chloe without thinking. "Mother." Chloe clutched her face, tears spilling. "I know I was wrong, I love him so much." Adrian's hand wrapped around her shoulders, protective, automatic. "It's enough," he murmured. "I don't blame you." His mother's eyes flashed, ice cold. "You should." Then the butler approached with a phone, face tense. "Madam, it's already outside." Adrian's mother read the headline on the screen, and in that instant, all restraint snapped. She yanked Chloe out of Adrian's arms and slapped her again, harder. "Look what you've done." The screen showed the trending topic in bold letters. Tate wedding switched brides mid-ceremony. Heir hides wife. Marries ex in secret. A blurry photo captured Chloe in white throwing herself into Adrian on the stairs. Adrian's stomach dropped. He stared at Chloe. "Chloe, did you leak this?" Chloe went white, hands turning cold. Because yes, she had. Before coming downstairs, she'd paid for the paparazzi's attention, bought the trend, pushed the fire, believing that once the world saw it, Adrian would be forced by pride, by reputation, by pressure to claim her. But in Adrian's eyes now, there wasn't love. There was something darker. Disbelief, then disgust. He closed his eyes as if fighting a pounding headache. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse. "Why?" "I'm doing this wedding for appearance," he said slowly, like pulling teeth. "To patch what I failed to give Ava. Not because I suddenly love her." His jaw tightened. "You were always the one I wanted. I thought everything else could be arranged." His eyes opened. And for the first time, when he looked at Chloe, she felt him seeing her clearly, without the soft light of nostalgia. "Except the wedding. Except the child," he continued. "Those were lines I couldn't cross. I thought that would be enough for you." His gaze hardened. "But you dragged it into the public just to force my hand." Chloe grabbed his sleeve, trembling. "Adrian, please listen. I did it because I love you." "Love?" Adrian's mother's laughter cut through the air, dry and sharp. She sat down as if exhausted by theatre. "If you truly loved my son," she said calmly, eyes fixed on Chloe, "why did you come to me back then and ask for money to leave him?" Silence fell like a blade. Adrian's head snapped up. "What did you say?" His mother didn't blink. "She asked me. She wanted a payout. She took it and left." Adrian stared at Chloe as if she had transformed into a stranger. Chloe's legs gave out. She sank onto the floor. Adrian covered his face with one hand and let out a broken, ragged laugh that sounded worse than crying. All those years, his bitterness toward his mother, his belief that Chloe had been forced away, collapsed into ash. He had been ready to abandon the world for her, and she had abandoned him first for money. He crouched in front of Chloe, lowering himself to her level, eyes deep and merciless. "Do you know what hurts?" he rasped. "I was prepared to lose everything for you." His voice tightened. "But before I could give up a single thing, you were the first to give up me." Chloe's sobs turned frantic. "I didn't have a choice. Your world, your family." "You always had a choice," Adrian said, rising. "You just chose yourself." Her screams chased him as he walked away. "Adrian, Adrian, Adrian." But he didn't turn back. Not once. A week of damage control followed. Adrian practically lived at the office, fighting fires, stabilizing shareholders, silencing headlines. When the crisis finally paused long enough for him to breathe, his mother called. "Your father will handle the company," she said. "You have something more urgent. Go find Ava." Adrian's fingers tightened around the phone. It hit him then, since the wedding. The real bride had never appeared. He opened his contacts, found Ava Lynn, and called. No answer. He called again. And again. He tried messaging. Blocked. The cold panic he'd never allowed himself to feel finally slipped under his skin. He dialed his assistant. Find my wife, Adrian said, voice clipped. Now. Ava had thought it through before she left. If Adrian truly wanted to find her, it would be effortless. So when she opened the door of her small rented apartment on the other side of the world and saw him standing at the bottom of the steps, she wasn't surprised. She had watched the news too. In the video, Adrian lowered the veil and smiled at guests, calling the bride shy. Of course, he hadn't cared enough to stop the lie. Ava stood in the doorway in a simple grey dress, hair loosely clipped back, face bare of the old careful glamour. She looked like herself for the first time in years. No warmth flickered in her eyes. What are you doing here? She asked. Adrian leaned against his car, hands in his pockets, posture immaculate as ever. For a split second, he looked at her like she was a stranger. You've caused enough trouble, he said, half scolding, half lecturing. It's time you come home. Then, as if remembering a softer reason might work, he added, Grandfather keeps asking about you. Trouble. Even now, he could only see her as a problem. Ava didn't bother lifting her chin. She simply stated the truth like reading a verdict. Adrian Tate, we're divorced. The two words were light, but they struck his ears like a gunshot. He froze, then let out a small laugh, as if she'd told a joke too stupid to entertain. Divorced? His eyes narrowed. I never signed anything. How exactly did you divorce me? He reached out and grabbed her wrist, tugging lightly as if the matter were settled. I don't have time for this. Come with me. Ava didn't move. If you don't believe me, she said evenly, go back to the bridal suite. Open the nightstand drawer. His grip faltered. The papers are there, Ava continued, gaze steady. The divorce agreement. With your signature. Adrian's jaw tightened. I didn't sign. And since you're so concerned about what else is there, Ava added, her mouth curving into something colder than the ocean wind, you'll find the medical certificate too. His eyes dropped instinctively to her stomach. You're still pregnant, he said, voice roughening. My family would never allow. Ava's smile sharpened. The baby? She asked softly. Oh, I forgot to mention. She looked him in the eye, calm as a closed door. I ended it. On the night you chose Chloe. Adrian's face drained white. His hand flew to her shoulders, gripping too hard, anger and pain and disbelief twisting into one storm. How dare you? He hissed. How could you do that without me? That was my child too, he almost shouted. Ava peeled his fingers off her skin one by one. Unhurried, almost gentle like removing shackles. Then she smiled. Not the old obedient smile. Not the one that begged. A smile that belonged to someone who had finally freed herself. Why wouldn't I dare? She said quietly. A child who arrives without blessing spends a lifetime paying for it. Adrian's throat worked. But I didn't agree. Ava's gaze didn't waver. Your agreement, she said, voice cool as steel, was never required when it came to my suffering. She stepped back into her doorway, the distance between them widening into something final, and when she spoke again, it was a question calm, precise, and sharp enough to cut. You keep saying your child, Adrian. Her eyes met his, unwavering. So tell me, when exactly did you ever choose us? So tell me, Ava said softly, her voice steady enough to feel like ice. Did you ever fulfill a father's duty? Even once? Adrian's throat tightened. And did you ever fulfill the duty of a husband? Her gaze didn't waver. Because even if I was pregnant, the moment Chloe called, you could abandon me, abandon our child without blinking. The words didn't come out as accusations. They came out as facts. The kind of facts you can't argue with, because the evidence is stitched into every year she survived. I didn't want my baby to grow up asking, she continued, why Dad never comes home, why Dad always has somewhere else to be, why Mum always smiles even when her eyes are empty. Her lashes trembled, reddened at the edges. But she refused to let the tears fall. She refused to give him the comfort of her collapse. I didn't want my child to inherit the same kind of wound I carried, Ava whispered. Adrian Tate, you didn't deserve to be their father. A pause. Then, quieter, brutal in its honesty, she added, and neither did I. The moment those words landed, Adrian's hands slackened on her shoulders. His grip loosened as if his strength had finally remembered shame. He stared at her like he was seeing the cost of his choices for the first time, and the taste in his mouth turned bitter, spreading to the back of his tongue until he couldn't speak without choking on it. Minutes or maybe whole lifetimes passed before his voice scraped out. Me and Chloe, that's over. He tried to step closer, tried to attach meaning to the sentence, like a bandage. So everything is over. Ava cut him off. Small voice, absolute decision. That's why you shouldn't come here again. She reached for the door frame. Her fingers curled around it, calm, deliberate, like she was about to close not just a door, but the last thin thread of her own endurance. Then a phone rang. Sharp, insistent, urgent, in the way bad news always is. The sound snapped the air between them like a wire. And in the end, Ava still boarded the flight back with Adrian, because sometimes freedom is delayed by family, by accidents, by the mess other people leave behind. The moment they landed, they didn't go home. They didn't speak. They went straight to the hospital, the car eating miles in silence, while sterile dread filled every gap. The corridor smelled of disinfectant. White lights flattened every face into something pale and uneasy. Their footsteps echoed too loudly, like the building itself wanted to expose them. That was when Ava understood. The nightstand drawer, the papers she had left behind, neat, final, labelled like a handover file, had been found. The divorce agreement bearing both signatures, the medical certificate from the procedure, and the diary, 5 years of words, thick as a brick, 5 years of a woman recording her own slow disappearance. Mrs. Tate had opened it, page by page, line by line, and something inside her had seized so hard she'd gone dizzy, vision darkening at the edges until she collapsed. She'd been rushed into emergency care before anyone could even argue about blame. Now, Ava stood beside the hospital bed and stared at the woman who, aside from Adrian, had been the only warmth in that marriage. Mrs. Tate's face was drained, lips cracked, an IV threaded into the back of a hand worn by time. She looked smaller than Ava remembered, as if shock had peeled years off her strength. Guilt rose in Ava's chest, sour and heavy. "Aunt," Ava's voice broke. "I'm sorry." Mrs. Tate exhaled, long and tired. With effort, she lifted her hand and patted Ava's knuckles, slow, gentle, still protective. "What are you apologizing for?" she whispered. "How did we let it get to the point where you feel you have to say that?" Her eyes closed. Memory surfaced. The first time she'd seen Ava at the old estate, a young girl standing at the doorway in a simple dress, faded from washing, but clean and carefully pressed. Clear eyes, nervous hands gripping a bag strap like it was armor. Polite, blushing, bowing as if she'd stepped into a world too grand to breathe in. Such a good child. And now, only 5 years later, that same girl's eyes held ash. The kind left when hope has burned so completely that even pain feels like a chore. Mrs. Tate had tried to warn her son. More than once. But whenever she mentioned marriage, Adrian's gaze drifted elsewhere, always toward the same ghost, always toward Chloe. Her words hit him like wind touching, passing, leaving nothing behind. At this point, Mrs. Tate didn't even know who to blame anymore. Fate? Pride? A son who had everything except the ability to love the person beside him. At the Tate estate, Mr. Tate sat rigidly on the sofa, staring at his son with quiet disappointment. Adrian had been his pride, brilliant, disciplined, steady. The kind of heir who made people relax because he never dropped the ball. Yet when it came to the most important part of a man's life, his family, he'd behaved like a boy, selfish and reckless, dragging everyone into his mess. Mr. Tate's voice was low. For the next few days, don't go near your mother. Her blood pressure spikes the moment she sees you. The doctor said no stimulation. He gestured toward the hallway. Go to your room. Sit there and think. Back in the bridal suite, the one still drenched in celebratory red, Adrian paced like a man trapped inside his own skull. Everything had spun out of control. The room looked exactly as it had the day Ava left. On the vanity, the wedding ring she never wore lay untouched, a small circle of cold metal waiting for a hand that had stopped believing. Adrian picked it up. Dust filmed its surface. Under the light, the gold looked dim, almost ashamed. His mind drifted to the day they'd chosen rings. A jeweler had presented sparkling diamonds under bright lamps. Adrian had assumed every woman wanted something huge, dazzling, undeniable, because that was how he understood compensation. Bigger, brighter, more expensive. But Ava's eyes had skimmed the glitter and gone to the corner of the case. A plain band. No stone. No pattern. Almost cheap enough to be invisible. I'll take that one, she'd said. He'd thought she liked simplicity. Now, holding the cold ring, he understood the truth. By then, she had already stopped hoping. Even choosing a ring, she'd been choosing an ending. He dropped it back onto the vanity and collapsed onto the sofa, dragging a hand through his hair as if he could claw the past into a different shape. That was when he saw it. The leather-bound diary on the coffee table. The one his mother had read herself into the hospital over. His chest tightened with something he refused to name. Annoyance? Fear? A dread so sharp it made him nauseous. He picked it up and opened it. The first page froze his hand mid-turn. October 1st, 2019. Today I married the man I love. But my groom flew overseas that same night just to see his first love in a wedding dress. The handwriting was neat, but the paper was wrinkled, warped in a familiar way, like tears had soaked through and dried, leaving a scar on the page. Adrian's mouth went dry. He remembered that day too clearly. He'd chosen that date on purpose, petty, stubborn, stupid, registering his marriage on the same day Chloe married someone else, as if he could prove to the world that he didn't care. Yet that night, when he saw Chloe's wedding photo online, bitterness had surged. He'd booked a flight. He'd left. He hadn't needed to imagine what Ava felt. She had written it. With tears that still marked the page years later, he turned the next pages. New Year's Eve, 2020. The first time someone welcomed the year with me. But I wasn't happy. He took me to the place he once confessed to her. October 1st, 2021. Our anniversary. I wasn't happy. The restaurant he chose was where he once knelt and offered her flowers. May 2024. She came back. I knew it was time for me to leave. Every entry was a wound reopened. Every line was a night she had swallowed words and forced a smile the next morning. The air thickened. Adrian felt his chest compress, breathing turning difficult, like an invisible hand was squeezing his ribs. He could almost see her alone beneath a soft lamp, head bowed, tears falling onto paper, writing out pain she never dared speak aloud. Outside the window, sunset bled into indigo. Stars appeared one by one, indifferent. His fingers trembled as he reached the last page. May 31st, 2024. Before the wedding, I decided to leave. Adrian Tate, I don't need you anymore. A single drop fell onto the ink. The final words blurred. Adrian blinked hard, confused by the wetness on the page, until he realized it hadn't come from the diary. It came from him. He lifted his hand to his face, and his palm came away damp. He had cried without noticing. That night, the light in the bridal suite stayed on until morning. The next day, when Adrian saw Ava again at the old estate, he almost didn't recognize her. Not because she looked different, but because she looked finished. And when the staff bowed and called her Mrs. Tate out of habit, because the divorce was still hidden to protect the old patriarch, something stabbed Adrian's chest so sharply he had to swallow the pain. He opened his mouth. Ava. The guest room door slammed in his face. A clean, cold sound. A boundary. A verdict. Adrian let out a dry, hollow laugh. And for the first time, he understood something terrifying. He hadn't lost her in one dramatic moment. He had lost her in 1,000 quiet ones. And now, no matter how loudly regret screamed inside him, she had finally gone silent. Ava had meant to pretend she hadn't seen him, but the memory of his arms shoving her out of the deer's path, of that single, instinctive push that had spared her body from antlers, rose like a stubborn ember. So, at the doorway of the hospital room, she paused and asked, almost unwillingly, "Are you feeling better?" Adrian nodded. His lips parted, as if the apology he'd been carrying for days might finally find daylight. And then his cousin, Vivian, swept in from behind like a gust of perfume and mischief, hooked an arm through Ava's, and dragged her away before a single honest word could escape. "Grandpa," Vivian chirped as the old man entered with his cane. "If he's fine, I'm kidnapping his wife for a few days." Adrian's head snapped up. "What are you planning?" Vivian ignored him. She squeezed Ava's arm and beamed. "We've had this planned forever. The minute you're done dealing with this disaster, I'm taking you to the hot springs at the foot of Snow Peak Mountain. A few days, no drama, just steam, silence, and the kind of air that makes your brain stop screaming." Mrs. Tate sat nearby, pouring Adrian a cup of warm water, adding casually, "She's right. Young people need to get out. Staying cooped up at home with your face looking like a funeral brochure is a direct path to depression." Something hollow opened in Adrian's chest. He watched the two women, one older, one younger, leaning close, plotting room types and buffet menus, debating swimsuits and slippers. Their laughter was light. Their plans didn't include him. For the first time, he understood with a clarity that hurt. He no longer had the right to decide where Ava went, and he was no longer the person she turned to first to ask, "Are you coming with me?" He'd just been discharged. He'd thought, foolishly, that proximity could substitute for forgiveness. Instead, he was being left behind again, this time politely. Vivian caught the shadow in his eyes and grinned like she enjoyed poking bruises. "Or," she said loudly, "you could come too. Make it fun." Grandpa Tate frowned. "You've barely left the hospital and you want to go on vacation?" Adrian looked at Ava first. She didn't speak. Her face was calm, almost indifferent, like his presence was weather. Something that might happen but didn't matter. He swallowed and turned to his grandfather. I'm fine. I've been lying in a bed for over 2 weeks. A change of air might help me heal faster. The old man studied him, then sighed and waved a hand. Go, if you must. But don't bother Ava. She needs rest. Vivian clapped once, delighted. Decision made. All 3 of us. The car left the city and climbed toward the resort tucked beneath Snow Peak Mountain. Vivian filled the drive with an itinerary so bright it could have been printed on a brochure. Hot springs in the morning, buffet at noon, skiing in the afternoon, live music at night. Adrian sat by the window, answering with the occasional, Ava leaned back with her eyes closed, replying only when politeness demanded it. After 20 minutes, Vivian realized she was essentially talking to herself. She twisted in her seat and squinted at them. You 2 are weird. Married on paper, but you can't manage 2 sentences to each other. You talk to me more than you talk to your own spouse. For a heartbeat, both Adrian and Ava froze. The divorce wasn't public. Only Grandpa, the Tates, and a tight circle of family knew. Vivian's eyes widened in sudden inspiration. Oh, I get it. You're still mad about the bride swap thing, right? She leaned toward Ava and patted her arm like a judge offering mercy. It's fine to be mad, but punish the right person. Then she jabbed a finger at Adrian. Your sentence is simple. You carry all the luggage. From the second we step out of the car until we check in. No complaining, not one word. Before Adrian could protest, 3 suitcases were shoved into his hands, accompanied by Vivian's delighted laughter and Ava's mild, unreadable nod. At least she didn't refuse. At check-in, Vivian announced, Meet in the lobby. I'm changing first, and disappeared into her room with a whistle. Adrian and Ava walked toward the other door and swiped the keycard. The door swung open. A wide double bed sat in the center. Pristine white sheets. 2 pillows pressed close together like an accusation. No guessing needed. Vivian had done it on purpose. Ava reacted instantly. She turned on her heel. I'm getting another room. Adrian reached out to stop her, more reflex than thought. Don't. Vivian can't keep a secret. If she finds out we aren't sharing, she'll tell Grandpa. Ava didn't even look at his hand. She stepped around it like it was air and kept walking. So what? Her voice was cool. Then she lifted her gaze, and the cold sharpened into a blade. Everyone already thinks I'm furious because of the bride swap. If I refuse to sleep in the same room, that's normal. She took another step, then added softly, each word designed to cut without raising her volume. And if Grandpa hears about it, that's your consequence. Adrian's throat closed. Ava turned her face fully to him now, eyes like frost. Also, we're divorced. What kind of divorced couple shares a bed? A pause. Her lips curved, not into a smile, but into something that resembled disgust. You might think it's fine. I don't. I think it's repulsive. Adrian had 1,000 things to say. Not one of them could survive her tone. Ava walked away, unhurried, and booked another room at the front desk, as if she were choosing a different seat on a train. Simple, practical, final. When Vivian later came out wrapped in a towel, she saw them stepping out of 2 separate rooms. Suspicion flickered in her eyes. Then she shrugged. Whatever was happening between them, she decided, was their mess. Asking too much only made things worse. That afternoon, Vivian reserved a private hot spring area, a wooden fence dividing the men's side and women's side, close enough for voices to carry, far enough to keep faces hidden. Steam rose thick and pale. The air smelled faintly of minerals. Warm water unknotted the body, one muscle at a time. Ava sank into the heat and let out a slow breath. For the first time in days, the cold that had been lodged behind her ribs loosened a fraction. Vivian draped an arm over Ava's shoulder, chatted about food and weather, and how resort towels were always too small. Then her voice turned quieter, more careful. "Ava," she began, "have you ever thought about giving that idiot a chance to fix things?" On the other side of the fence, Adrian had been rinsing his shoulder. The moment his name floated into the steam, his hands stilled. Ava didn't open her eyes. Her head rested on the stone edge as if she were too tired to even be angry. After a long pause, she answered, almost indifferent, "Maybe later." Behind the fence, Adrian gave a short laugh that held no joy, only bitterness and relief twisted together. Vivian heard it, winced, and wisely let the subject die. Dinner was buffet style, warm lights reflecting off trays of steaming food. Each of them carried a plate. Adrian deliberately stayed just behind Ava, pointing out dishes like a man trying to rebuild a house with toothpicks. "The cod is good," he said. "Try it. The salad's Japanese style. This grilled beef back then you." Each time he placed something on her plate, Ava calmly slid it aside. "I'm allergic." "I don't like that." "Not my taste." Her voice never rose. That was the worst part. Her calmness made every rejection feel permanent. Vivian watched, then smacked Adrian's shoulder hard enough to make him flinch. "What are you doing? Don't tell me you were married 5 years, and you still don't know what she likes." Adrian's mouth curved in a faint, painful smile. He truly didn't. For 5 years, Ava had eaten around him, built meals around his preferences, memorized his tastes, arranged her life to fit his appetite, and he had never learned hers. That night, everything Adrian ate tasted like ash. The avalanche had sealed the only road out of the mountain town. For the next few days, the resort stopped feeling like a vacation and started feeling like a snowbound holding cell, white walls of weather, endless flakes. The kind of cold that didn't just bite skin but pressed on the lungs until every breath felt heavier than the last. Ava and Adrian had been dug out in time. Mild hypothermia, scrapes, bruises, nothing the town clinic couldn't handle, with warm blankets, saline, and stern warnings. Vivian hovered like a hurricane in designer boots, firing instructions at the doctor, fussing with the blanket around Ava's shoulders, setting a thermos of hot congee on the bedside table as if it were a sacred offering. Only when she'd ensured Ava had warmth, food, and silence did she finally close the door behind her. The room settled into quiet. Ava turned her face toward the window. Outside, the sky hung low and bruised, a dull grey lid over the world. Snow fell thick and heavy, each flake blooming briefly on the glass before melting into cold, watery streaks that slid downward like tears that didn't want to be seen. The air inside the room felt dense, as if the storm had seeped into the walls. Ava tried to name the feeling in her chest, leftover fear. Yes, the animal panic of being buried alive. But there was something else, something complicated and unwelcome, looping through her mind like a stubborn reel. The moment the mountain cracked, the roar, and the way Adrian hadn't hesitated not even a heartbeat before he sprinted straight at her. She didn't want to be moved by it. She had trained herself for years not to be moved by him. Yet her body remembered the weight of his arms pinning her down, shielding her face, the firm pressure of his hand over her mouth as he murmured, steady and low, "Don't breathe. Don't let the snow get in." She stared at the melting streaks on the glass until her eyes burned. Somewhere down the hallway, Vivian's voice rose, sharp as a slap. "You absolute idiot. What did you do when I wasn't there?" Ava heard the thud of a door closing, then the muffled cadence of interrogation. Vivian had the tone of a judge who didn't need evidence to know the defendant was guilty. Adrian's voice, quieter, slower confession, poured out in pieces. A rushed marriage. Years of vanishing. A woman named Mira Shaw who had always been his moonlight, even when he tried to pretend she wasn't. A divorce signed while he was drunk, engineered by the very person he'd prioritized. Then Vivian again, incredulous. Of course she booked another room. Of course she turned away from the bed like it was poison. It would have been stranger if she stayed. A pause. Then Vivian's anger crested. The sound of her hitting him, likely not hard enough to injure, but hard enough to shame. You left her alone for 5 years. Vivian snapped. A wife in your house living like a widow. And you're surprised she doesn't look at you anymore. The hallway went quiet again. Ava's lashes fluttered. She didn't move. She didn't respond to any of it. That was her new skill. Letting storms pass without opening the door. The next morning, the town's road was still blocked, the weather still refusing to negotiate. Vivian and Adrian looked like they hadn't slept 2 sets of dark circles, one from rage and the other from regret. Ava opened her door with her ski gear in her arms and raised an eyebrow. Did you two lose all night at a casino? Vivian waved a hand lazily. Horror movies. I forced him to watch horror movies. Adrian didn't even protest. His eyes were dull, his mouth set in a line, like punishment. Ava didn't ask more. She simply walked out toward the cable car. Snow Peak Mountain glittered under a rare slice of sunlight, thousands of crystals scattered across the slope. Ava wore pale pink ski gear and black goggles, her posture steady at the top of the run. Then she pushed off. She carved through the white like she belonged to it, clean turns, controlled speed. A grace that looked effortless even though it wasn't. Vivian slid up beside her and whistled. Ava, since when do you ski like you're in a commercial? Ava's lips curved faintly. I learned a while ago. She didn't say, I learned because you loved it, Adrian. I learned because I wanted to stand beside you. She didn't say, the first time I finally managed to bring you here, you left me mid-slope because Mira called. The memory sat in her throat like ice. She adjusted her grip on the poles, the old safety rules from years ago blurring at the edges like a dream. Her palms were sweating inside her gloves. She didn't hear the first crack. It was faint, like a branch snapping somewhere far away. Then it deepened, sharp and wrong, an ugly tearing sound that made every instinct in the body scream. The snow beneath them shifted. A whole sheet of it began to slide. Someone shouted high and panicked. Avalanche! Skiers scattered, boards scraped. People lunged for rocks, for ridges, for anything that might stop the mountain from swallowing them whole. Ava froze. The world tilted into white violence. The avalanche came like a collapsing sky, roaring and thundering, a living wall of snow racing straight toward her. Her ears rang. Her legs wouldn't move. Ava. A shadow slammed into her from behind. Adrian wrapped around her and forced her down into the slope. His body curved over hers like armor. His hand pressed hard over her nose and mouth. Don't breathe, he said, voice shaking but controlled. Not yet. Don't let it in. Ava shut her eyes, held her breath. The mountain hit. Everything became pressure and noise and darkness. Snow slammed into them, buried them, packed around them until the world was gone. When the roaring finally stopped, the silence that followed was worse, thick, absolute, terrifying. Adrian moved first. He fought for space, tearing at straps, pulling off stiff gear before it could freeze and trap them. He tried to dig upward with bare hands, nails scraping, fingertips numb within minutes. Too much snow, too deep. No light. He stopped digging and pulled Ava closer, wrapping her in his arms to share heat, to keep her from slipping into sleep, to keep her alive. He started talking nonsense at first. Stories from childhood, the kind of things he'd never bothered to tell her when the world was warm and easy. If this had been years ago, it might have softened her. But Ava's heart was a sealed room now frozen shut, not by weather, but by 5 years of being left behind. Adrian's voice faltered into a bitter laugh. "Maybe this is us dying once," he whispered, "so we can start over." Ava turned her face away, her voice cold enough to match the snow. "If you want to die, die alone. I'm not dying with you." Adrian didn't argue. He only held her tighter. Minutes blurred. Her fingers lost sensation. Frost clung to her lashes. Her eyelids grew heavy, heavy, heavy. "Ava!" Adrian rasped, panic punching through his composure. He cupped her cheek with a trembling hand. "Don't sleep. Please. Don't." Then above them, a metallic clatter. Snow shifted. A blade of light pierced the darkness. "Here!" someone shouted. "We found them." The brightness dragged her back from the white dream like a hook. When Ava opened her eyes again, she saw a white ceiling and a harsh overhead lamp. She lifted a hand to shield her face from the glare. "Ava!" Vivian burst in, already yelling for the clinic doctor like she planned to personally fight hypothermia. Ava's gaze drifted past Vivian's shoulder toward the doorway, toward the hall, toward the unspoken question. Adrian wasn't there. And somehow, that absence felt safer. But it didn't erase the memory of his body covering hers when the mountain fell. It didn't erase the awful truth her mind kept circling now. Like a bruise you can't stop pressing. He could save her life in a second. But he had never learned how to stay.